Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to the school board meeting of the Policy Committee of the board. This meeting is being held at the District Administration Office. I am actually calling in and from a remote location, and I will be the chair of the meeting. The meeting is being live streamed on Zoom and recorded for future viewing. I will hand over the meeting to, I believe, Ms. Schaefer.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be back in policy this morning. And I do have some slight reordering of the agenda that I'd like to do, if it's okay with the committee this morning, due to some other individual schedules who are with us this morning. I'd like to move a brief discussion on the student wellness process to the top of the agenda, just as an update, and then move to the tax waiver request and purchasing potentially next, in light of Mr. Orlando's schedule, if that works for the committee. Thank you. So just to give a bit of an overview to our work around the student wellness policy development. The last time we were together, we talked a little bit about the work and the evolution of this policy, which I think may become, well, we're hoping it will become a little bit of a standard in terms of how to evolve the current mandated language around student wellness and make it more in line, or make it more in line with our current view of what student wellness means in the context of a K-12 public school setting. And one of the ways that I've found over the years that is good to get a lot of voices involved, but also kind of set the stage for how we build a policy from scratch like this, is to get a lot of input on what I call our purpose statement. And so this is what you have in front of you, and I apologize, Suba, there is a sheet that I handed out this morning, and I will be sure to email you as soon as I can. But this really reflects some already ongoing revision and development of a purpose statement. And what that helps us do is get on the same page in a snapshot, as opposed to trying to put a full policy out in front of a lot of people and get input that way. Because what this can do is drive the sort of, if you flip the page there, the definition section, like what are we trying to define, what is the common language, and also that section that you usually see in our policies around delegation of responsibility. So I think once we get settled on what that purpose statement is, it really helps to build out the policy from there. So Kristen has been extremely helpful in working through this with us, and we just have been what I call shopping it around to different committees and putting it in front of different audiences. And the exercise that I like to do with something like this is just to ask, and you don't have to do this today, but if you'd like, take this, circle things that you like in it, like what resonates with you, what is really good for us to like keep, what is essential, and then things that you have questions about or you don't like, either draw a line through it or underline it and put your question to the side. And then we, continue to bring those together and evolve this. I mean, it's been great because we've done things like reorder all of the paragraphs, which I think make it flow better. So all of the input has been, helpful in building it to this point. So I'd ask for members of the committee, when you have time, to take a look at this and give that kind of feedback to us, because it really is the easiest way to hone in on what we really want to convey, what is Lower Merion's, sort of view and focus on student wellness. And again, that if as you're doing this, if there are terms that you think need definition, please continue to add them to that list. So we can work on those as well and continue to bring that back to you. So again, the idea is that by the final policy committee meeting this year, we'll have this fully fleshed out as a policy, and then into next year we can build out the administrative regulation. Any questions about the process?
So just one request. I know, and because we did a similar process with the equity policies, would it be possible to have an electronic version of this as a working document so that we can all collaborate?
Absolutely. I can send a Google link to that, and I've done it in different ways with different groups, so sometimes as a worksheet is easier, but I will absolutely do that. And Shawana is here, and so one of the things we did and think is important is connecting this to our work around belonging. And I think even as recent as this morning, as I was driving in, the NPR had a story about really the importance of belonging and connections to overall wellness as essential. You know, in the context of social media and how important that is to student wellness. So I think I was like, oh, that really reinforces the message that Shawana shared with the Wellness Council last week. So I don't know if you had or wanted to add anything, or I don't want to put you on the spot. So, and I'll make sure you get an electronic copy of that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I do have a quick question. I believe that you and Ms. Shurak were meeting to talk about sort of ways to broaden our ways of getting input on it from outside of this committee, and I was just curious where that process was.
So in addition to the policy committee, we've already taken it to our principals, our Wellness Council, the full Wellness Council. We have a calendar of additional meetings and working with principals to get it in front of students as well. So there's an agenda, and I can share that with you too, that lists all of the known meetings, but it is something that's really almost easy to take and put in front of people as opportunities arise too. So any member of the board or here today that has suggestions about if there are specific groups and you want to make sure we're not missing anyone, I'm happy to make sure it's in our calendar of events for this particular policy. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I might turn it off like this next. So the next, as I mentioned, since Mr. Orlando's here, there are two items. One under first reading, the tax waiver requests, which begins on page 34, and the purchasing administrative regulation under page 55. Ken, are you able to tee that up?
Yes, I'm happy to. The board may recall within the last few months passing a resolution required by Act 55 of 2022, passed by the General Assembly, which required the, make sure I'm on the right page here. It required school districts to waive penalties and additional charges for taxpayers who didn't get a tax notice during their first year of ownership of real property. This frequently happens where the districts, the tax collector's records aren't up to date with recent sales, so a tax notice will go to a former owner rather than a current one, and somebody ends up not paying their taxes, even though it's a known fact that everybody owns real property has to pay school taxes. Nonetheless, the General Assembly has said that we have to waive for that first year for anybody who didn't get a tax notice. So that's all this says. That's all the policy says. The administrative regulation, on the other hand, has a process in place for how to actually get a waiver. It's all very, dry and mechanical and all that stuff. But that's being parsed out with the business office and the tax collector. But as far as the board's policy standpoint, you just, the policy has the small change you see.
Okay, I have a question. Should we call this policy the tax penalty and interest waiver request?
Well, it's not just, yeah, you know what, that actually isn't a bad idea. That's actually better, more descriptive than what we had.
Okay.
Tax, interest, and penalty waiver requests. We could call it property tax. Property tax.
Right.
Property tax, interest, and penalty waiver requests. Okay, that's actually a better description than what we have.
And my only other question is, on the waiver request form, it doesn't say that there's a deadline of December 15th.
There isn't one? I don't know that the, go ahead, Vic.
Well, there's two different tax waivers in there, Ken. There's the Act 57 one, and then there's the current tax waiver situation we have. I think that's reflected in here. The form that's here, when an ownership changes, new ownership transfers a title, they have 12 months to do that. So you have two different type of tax waivers in this policy. We have the old tax waiver, and I have the new one under Act 57. So if you go under page 34, Ken,
Right.
the top paragraph, I think that's what's confusing. So like this form here, there is no deadline. You have 12 months from the date of the transaction. Whether there's a different one in here, it's a different type of waiver. I think that's what Sue was asking for clarification.
Yeah, the waiver, the form that's attachment A to the regulation is only for the Act 57 waivers. It's not, has nothing to do with the other. We don't have a form for the more what I'll call traditional tax waiver requests.
Okay.
There is a form?
There's a
Well, then we should, then that should be, but it's never been part of the regulation before then.
I don't know if it's been part of the regulation. We do have a form.
Oh, well then.
Yeah, that we work with your office in developing.
Okay, well then we'll parse, then what we'll do is we'll bring the regulation back with another section that has the form for the, what I'll call the more traditional requests, and then we can just add that. So.
Thank you.
It doesn't change the policy.
Are there any questions?
I have two quick questions. One, on the AR, should we reference the form? Like say that the form is part of the AR?
We will. We
Okay.
will, what we'll do is we'll take, we didn't have an AR before. So now
Yeah.
we have an AR, but it only covers the Act 57 requests. We'll expand the AR to have a section on what I've been calling the traditional tax waiver requests, maybe the legacy tax waiver requests, and we'll have a form, an attachment B for that form.
And then in the policy, should we reference the resolution that we passed, we're required to pass? But I think that it would be valuable to put in the policy, like why we're doing this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I don't know
Well,
if that means referencing the resolution or referencing the law.
How about if we, before, if you look under the second paragraph under residential property taxpayers, we can start it out with pursuant to, we can say pursuant to Act 57 of 2022, comma, beginning in, is that,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll do that.
It's only on the form, Ken, it references that. But if you want to put in a policy too, that'd be a good idea.
But I think the point Lucy is making is we want the world to know that we're doing this because we have to. Isn't it?
No, because to me that sounds like we're only doing it because we have to. I think it's more of, there's a reason for doing it. Maybe I'm just using
The
different words.
catalyst for this
The catalyst,
is state
yes.
law. Yes.
Okay, are there any other questions?
So we'll make the change to the title, and we'll add that little beginning to that, preface to that sentence, and then we'll bring the regulation back with an additional section and an additional attachment.
But it's ready for a first read, correct? As amended, yep. And then the next item, Vic is here, is AR 610 purchasing, which is on page 55.
Again, this is just a regulation update. We do this almost every year. We bring it to the committee because we always bring any changes to ARs to the committee, but because it's non-discretionary, what is non-discretionary is the fact that every year under state law, the Department of Labor and Industry updates the thresholds for requiring competitive biddings and requiring telephonic price quotations. You can see if you look in, it went from the competitive bidding purchase requirement threshold went from 21.9 to 22.5. It's gone up every year. It'll go up again next year. And what's called the requirement to get telephonic or written quotes has gone up from 11,800 to 12,200. So because these numbers go up every year and because we don't have a choice, we added language at the beginning that basically say, we're just going to do this every year. I mean, we'll let you know, but we're not going to be bringing it to policy meeting because there's nothing to even talk about. That makes sense.
Yeah, so just historically, the bid threshold was like 10,000 for how many decades, Ken? And then several years ago, the Commonwealth decided to adjust it through a CPI every year just because and that's basically what this is. So Ken's right. Every December, January, it gets updated, and we just want to reflect that.
Thank you. How will we get notified of the changes each year subsequent to this year?
Just go to board update.
Okay, thank you.
It's published.
Are there any questions?
It's published too.
And also, well, it gets published, and we include it every year. We also include it in the solicitor office update, which you all get.
I get notified by PASBO and all the other organizations when the adjustment's made.
If you're asking, I don't know, Sue, but if you're asking how Lower Merion gets the information, it's published, disseminated. If you're asking how you as the board will get the information, you'll get it through either board update, a solicitor office update, or both.
Okay, it was the latter because of this new language.
So I think historically, Ken, when he does his quarterly update, it's been in there that there's been adjustments. So I think it's typically how we've done it. We also can, through a board update, can notify them. I think she's asking how would the board know if it's being changed without going into policy every time to know it?
Yeah.
So we just have to notify them either through your legal update or we can do that.
Yeah, it'll either be through a board update or through, like I said, a solicitor office update, or it'll just be, we'll just bring it here. This doesn't prevent it coming here. It just means that we don't have to wait for a policy meeting before the regulation gets enacted.
Okay, got it.
Right, so the AR should probably be updated every year, but this allows for the work to start before the policy meeting.
Yep. It'll be here's the new regulation as opposed to here's what we're proposing to do.
Okay, are there additional questions?
So I just have one question, and this is just more general in terms of how are we, so I know we have our rules around the bids and all of that, but how are we looking at equity around purchasing and vendors? How do we apply that lens to this?
Well, there's a couple different ways that we go out for bid. Either we do bid through traditional ways, just through the newspaper, and those vendors can bid, and it's the lowest responsible bidder. Then also through the state contract system, co-stars, et cetera, there's different vehicles that we can look through that. So we take on the lowest responsible bidder either through those two different vehicles.
I guess my question is, do we at all look at the diversity of our vendors, and do we do any assessment, whether it's in the act of or retroactively looking, how are we looking at equity in terms of who we're hiring and who we're contracting with? Is that, how do we apply that diversity lens from, because we definitely have an active way to do it around curriculum and all of that, so I'm looking on the business side, what are we doing or how are we approaching that?
Do you want to say something? Well, I think through co-stars, it's a low responsible bidder, so whoever is on there, we don't have the information what their background is, to be honest with you. So it's what is awarded through the state system, and that's based lowest responsible bidder that we accept. Through, if we don't do too much as far as publicize the newspaper and so forth, when we do, it's the lowest responsible bidder. And I think that's the law, Ken, as far as what we're responsible to do. So that's basically, what we do.
The state and federal procurement laws limit what you can do in terms of preferential treatment of any group in the procurement process. Where you can, as a board, where you can promote equity is in the recruitment and advertising process for vendors. In other words, making sure when bids go out or requests for qualifications go out, that they can be make sure they're targeted and disseminated towards a broader group of people, or group of vendors. I can share with the board, like, for example, what the School District of Philadelphia does in this regard. They have certain requirements that vendors are required to fill out as part of their vendor qualifications, and it might be instructive for you to take a look at what they do. So I'll be happy to share that with you.
Can I add on to that? What about with the, we have some companies that we enter into master agreements with.
Enter into what kind of agreement?
Master agreements, in which we regularly use them under purchase orders. How, and what in the equity lens, can we look at it through there?
To an extent. It can be a factor, and that's one of the things that you'll see when we, with the information that I can share with you from, like, for example, from School District of Philadelphia, where they indicate how that information can be used with respect to the awarding process. It's easier to do it with professional services, with bids that aren't, procurements that aren't required for competitive bidding. It's a little more weighted if it's just simply a request for qualifications, or if it's a request for, like I said, professional services. I don't know if that helped at all. I have more information I can provide.
I was just going to add more broadly that PASBO is working on looking at business officials through the equity lens, and I've been a part of that work with them for the past 2 years. So we are, because when you look at we look at that, the chart of equity being embedded in everything that we do. The finances and expenditures are part of that, and PASBO is working to help us look at it through the equity lens.
And PASBO is the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
We do have a few audience members, so just Suba, so you're aware. There.
Oh, okay, I apologize, I was not aware. Please feel free to call on them.
Does anyone have any comments about this? Okay. You okay if I jump in? Sort of co-chair. Okay, so thank you, Vic, for your time this morning. I think that's those are the only two items that you have on this agenda, correct? Am I missing something? Vic, is there anything else on this agenda that you?
I don't think so.
Okay. So moving back to I think the top of the agenda, which is the proposed for adoption item policy in AR 825, relationship with law enforcement, which is on page 1 of your packet, and we've looked at a couple of times, just a minor revision to the policy itself, I did get a little more detail just for background information about the relationship with Narberth and Lower Merion Police. They have an internal relationship such that because of Narberth's size and operations, they are authorized to sort of take over in situations where there isn't, sufficient support or police presence in Narberth, just again because of the size. So when we talked a little bit about what this, memorandum of understanding means, in many cases, in events that the school would have a need to know, Lower Merion Police would, most likely be already involved in it. So just to sort of bridge some of those conversations that we had, I did have an opportunity to better understand the inner workings of those departments, which makes sense based on my experience as well.
I was wondering if in the AR, it makes sense to sort of acknowledge or repeat that, we have this MOU with Lower Merion because that's where our schools are physically located, and there aren't any located in Narberth. I think that just in case people question, like, why LM and why not Narberth? Like, if it's just a sentence in there that says, right? Because I think in the policy, it talks about the Pennsylvania Safe Schools Act, which is what defines that.
Right.
I just think
I wonder if like a footnote there, we could just add to where
Yeah, like a
following
footnote.
Narberth Police, and then kind of an explainer.
Yes. I thought we had that. I'm sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
I think it's
I'm looking
implied.
at page 8, on page 2 of the regulation. In the event that the district needs to work with Narberth.
But I think that's where it's implied. I think what you're
Yeah.
asking it to be more explicit, why.
Oh, why?
Why.
Why it has got it, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's.
Because before we started this, I had never thought through that. And once you think through it, it's like, oh, well, of course. But, I don't know, I think it'd be easier to just put it in there.
That makes complete sense. Okay, we will add a sentence that says, because no district schools are located in the borough of Narberth, there is no requirement that there be a formal memorandum of understanding between the school district and the borough of Narberth in the event the district needs to work with. Okay.
I was rereading the second paragraph, first sentence, and when it says we're going, school vehicles, trips, and sponsored activities, it still applies. Does that mean just within Lower Merion and Narberth, or does that mean everywhere? Because
Well, it's only going to Lower Merion Township Police and Narberth Police. Well, Lower Merion Township Police are only going to do anything about it if it occurs in Lower Merion Township.
I would recommend that we add within Lower Merion and Narberth then, just to clarify it.
I will say, or anywhere else that Lower Merion Police Department and LMSD share jurisdiction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so that leads me to the question of, what if something happens on a school trip and they're, at a Radnor soccer game?
Radnor Police would get involved, and we would interact with Radnor Police, but not pursuant to any MOU.
Got it, okay. So there wouldn't be an act,
It would likely
does
be
it
a very...
default to like what Radnor School District, like that school district's?
That's a good way
Is it likely that township's police would work under the framework of their MOU?
Yes. I think defaulting to it is a good way to put it. Yes.
Okay.
It would create an expectation of why would they act differently to us than they do. If they started to act differently to us than they would to Radnor, we could legitimately say, why are you changing your practices and procedures for us different than you do for the Radnor School District?
And then would it be general practice that the Radnor Police would then work with the Lower Merion Police? Or I guess it depends on whatever the incident or whatever the event was.
Yeah, I think it would depend.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. If the crime was committed in Radnor, I don't know why they would ever feel the need to get Lower Merion Township Police involved.
Okay.
Unless they had to, maybe background, maybe to see if there were other offenses. This isn't really something I know that much about.
Hopefully that's a good thing, right? You haven't had to need to.
Enough for personal or professional experience.
Any other questions from the board? Any community questions? Okay. I think we're okay to move on. Subo, are you okay?
Yes, thank you for fielding that.
Sure. So I did. I think I asked you. I said I looked out there. I don't. This is what I should do now. I saw no's. No, that's okay. So next on the agenda, this will. I'm sorry. I should clarify or confirm. This will move for adoption at the next business board meeting. The next item on the agenda for first reading is policy 8 and a question mark because we haven't put a number on it. It's currently titled cybersecurity. That may change today. And George Fraser is here to give us an overview. I know he's worked with Whistler on this as well. So.
Good morning. The genesis of this policy is twofold. I think we're all aware of the increasing incidence of cybercrime. We hear it on the news regularly. Los Angeles area school district recently shut down by cyber criminals in a ransomware attack. We heard about it with a pipeline attack, reducing the ability to deliver fuel not long ago. And the numbers of attacks against school districts, although it went down a little bit this year, is still continuing. There was 58 attacks, reported attacks, 2 years ago, 45 last year. The closest one for us was Souderton School District in September of 2019. So there really isn't, unfortunately, an end in sight in cybercrime. And this was recently picked up by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who updated its Breach Notification Act. I think it's Act 696, if I recall correctly, and changed its reporting requirements. So the growing need for us to focus more on the potential for a cyber-related incident and the change in the Breach Notification Act was the genesis of us creating, I wish I could say I actually composed this. I have to thank Whistler for composing the policy and bringing it to you today. We are continuing to focus more attention on cybersecurity and having a policy that we can use to memorialize some of the things that we need to do to help defend the district against bad actors is important.
Okay, are there any questions about this policy?
I have a question on, I wonder if we can start it with sort of the why, like putting into a sentence what you just said, sort of, this is why we're doing it, instead of starting with the, like, this is the rule. Kind of like we did with the law enforcement one, you know, the board recognizes that this is an important thing.
Oh. Okay, which did you have more in mind? Something like, in order to ensure compliance with the Data Breach and Prevention Act, comma, the district adopts this policy, or in order to provide...
To try to keep our community safe. I don't know. Something both?
Yeah, we could do both. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So we want compliance and to ensure,
Because to me, it's more than just we're doing this because there's a law. It's, you know, we're doing this because it's the right thing to do, right?
to protect the privacy of the school, or the members of the school community. That sound right? Is that the value we're promoting, for the protection of the privacy of the members of the school community?
Yep.
Okay.
I just wondered, with the scope of it, is this only for servers, if we have data saved anywhere on servers that we don't, like a server bank or does this, I would assume this encompasses both of it, because it's data of students and families in this district, and I wondered if we needed to clarify that.
So let me say that back. So I think you're asking, do we have data on third-party services, like an application service provider or a software as a service, as an example? Yes. The IT industry as a whole is moving more and more to the cloud, which they are clouds. So yes. One of the items that was added, one of the bullets there that was added speaks to trying to reduce risk. And so as we use these third-party products, we have to evaluate those third-party products for how well they're taking cybersecurity seriously. So that would be part of that role, would be reducing risk when using third-party products.
Now, another question I have is about all the parent-related groups for HSAs are now, a majority of them are now using membership toolkits, which I know you vetted when we first brought that on about 4 or 5 years ago. Would this be encompassed under that policy, or?
Well, so an HSA using a third-party product, such as an ASP, I think that's something we'd have to examine. I don't know the relationship of HSAs in terms of the district and our responsibility to them. So I think that would have to be, there's a governance conversation there about that.
Yeah, I believe it's only, the data is only like what you would get for directory data.
Certainly, but I mean, we try to vet those agreements to ensure that that data isn't being used for third-party marketing or being sold off in some way for advertising. So I think what we would need to do is take a look at, like, what's our governance as a district in relationship to the HSA, and that'll help steer the conversation about whether or not we get involved in trying to mitigate the risk for third-party products that they're using.
Additionally, beyond what it was done when it was brought on, you're saying, because things can change. I mean, I'm part of the group that got the last pass breach that just happened. That was safe when we started it, but now it's degraded downwards, and so it worries me that, we are using a third-party product, which isn't on an annual basis being reviewed of how well they're protecting the data.
Sure. I mean, that's a concern that we have as well. As products change, they change their terms of use, they change their privacy policies. So again, I think we need to look at, your concerns are the same concerns we have. I just don't know the governance of the HSAs in relationship to the school district. I don't know if, and I think that's a conversation we probably need to have, whether or not we're accepting the risk for products that the HSAs are selecting.
And I think it also has to do with whether or not they notify us even.
I agree. I mean, I think we do have an established relationship under policy with our home and school associations, and we do try to support with vetting products, as you mentioned. So I think it probably, is worthwhile to have a conversation about the how often that's getting renewed, because that's a subscription we're not managing, correct? That's, once we've vetted it, it's, the HSA has been using it. So again, we can maybe talk about, I do agree with George about there is a governance piece there that I think makes more sense to have a conversation away, probably from this table, just to help support the work that they do, because certainly we want to be that kind of support and don't want them to, obviously in alignment with the policies that we have in place.
And that is something that maybe something to work with the IC on, who did help to bring it in, and I know it is an annual basis is renewed. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I do.
Is there a plan to have an administrative regulation under this?
Yes. On page 20, that list of bullets there is suggested administrative regulations that need to be developed to better operationalize this policy.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a question on page 21. I guess these are still under the definitions when it talks about notice and alert to ineffective individuals. It's an email notice only if it's a prior business relationship. Like I wasn't sure why that was, how that was different than if it's a person.
So this language is directly out of the PA Breach Notification Act. So I'm going to defer to Ken in regard to that language.
So they should have been clearer.
It's correct. That's the word that's used in the statute. We could flush that out a little bit and say, for purposes of the school district, well, no, it's really just basically saying it just relieves you of the obligation to mail everything if it's somebody that you had a business relationship. We'll confirm that being a parent or guardian would constitute a business relationship with the school district so that you can use email. We'll confirm that. And once we do, we will clarify that includes, that business relationship includes any member of the school community.
So this is saying if it's a prior business relationship, it's okay to just use email and you don't have to send the others. You don't have to call and you don't have to write. You can just use email. Does that imply if it's a personal relationship that you have? No, because it says may refer to any of the following methods. Mm-hmm. So we can choose whatever we want. I guess
that's why
something I'm missing. I'm missing something. Sorry.
So the way I kind of read this was, let's have a scenario where we have students that are actively in the school district, and then we have alumni. So for alumni, we may not have their we may not necessarily have a current email address for them, but we do have a mailing address for them. But for students, and I'm just painting a scenario. I don't know that this is how we would actually move forward, but there may be scenarios where we have one form of contact information for a group of people and we don't have that for another group of people. So my sense is, and again, I never want to find us in this situation, but should we find ourselves in this situation, we would probably use a variety of methods to communicate this situation to those different groups of people.
All right, it's just, for some reason, the business piece popped up to me, like, why is that being treated differently? But it sounds like that's the wording that was put in the, sort of given to us, so to speak.
Yes, this is directly from the,
Okay.
that statute that Ken referenced.
So then in terms of timing, so I'm looking at page 23 now, those are also predetermined?
Yeah, this is.
You're supposed to do this within 3 days and that within 7?
Yeah, this is actually the biggest change in here. At least for me, this was the biggest change that came out of that updated law, where we're under very strict timelines now on reporting. So, what worries me about like this one, I always have something to worry about, by the way, when it comes to, but just to prepare you. But what worries me about something like this is, it was probably about 6-8 years ago, we had a DDoS attack that literally knocked the district off the internet for about a week. And we needed to get consultants on board. And we were out of sync with the board meetings, and we needed to get a PO cut right away, and it required a special meeting. So if we need to act within 3 and 7 days, it's basically saying we're going to need a lot of flexibility to cut POs if we have to. So how this timeline filters down to our action could be in getting resources on board and generating POs for that. So I think this is going to demand more flexibility in resources that we can get on board for an incident like this.
And I would just want to share with George's leadership around this and making sure that we're sort of going through scenarios like this together with a trainer in the event that something like this would happen. We're scheduling to do that in the next month, I believe, correct? So that we're it sounds very daunting to think like this. When this happens, we're, ready to act, but, the way that I think George is mindful of the preparation we need to do on our end, and taking the time to do that is critical, because all of this could happen tomorrow. I mean, whether we like it or not. So again, just another example of the district needing to pay attention to a lot of things at once, and being prepared to handle something that would be, I don't want to say catastrophic is the wrong word for a data breach in some people's minds, but it really is, from an operational standpoint, pretty catastrophic if things happen that we don't have the ability to, kids have access to what they need in the classroom, but we can't run systems that operate our heating and cooling. We can't run systems that run our cameras. We can't run systems that pay people. So I think while it sounds like very it could happen, if we're not prepared when it does, we are it's very much to our detriment. So I just want to acknowledge your efforts in making sure that we're all prepared for this kind of thing.
Thank you.
I was able to send her the policies.
Are there any other questions from the community?
No, I have one more question. I just was wondering, what for items like in section, the personal information, do we maintain those on our own cloud servers encrypted, or is it, oh yeah, page 22, I'm sorry.
Do we maintain?
Is that these type of, I don't know that we would have driver's licenses or things like that, but anything that we have on there that could be detrimental, really detrimental to somebody if it got out on a breach, do we maintain those in an encrypted form on our cloud servers?
Great question. So, to say that back, do we know that all of our SaaS ASP products, third-party products, are encrypting data in transit, data at rest? So data in transit is when you see that little lock in the corner, right? So I would, without looking at every one, I would say, yeah, I think we can pretty much say that data is being encrypted while in transit. Data encrypted at rest really only applies to when that machine has physical access, right? So I can physically get to that machine, take that hard drive out, connect it to another machine, and get to that data, right? So we hear a lot about data being encrypted on the server. Really what we want to ensure is that that data is being encrypted when it's in transit, because encrypted at rest would mean someone actually breaking into that data center, pulling that hard drive out, and then taking it, putting it on another machine and unencrypting it. So I think in terms of risk, we want to ensure that data is being encrypted in transit, because it's less likely that that company is going to have a physical break-in where that hard drive is taken out of that computer.
Okay.
Is that? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that answers.
I love talking about this stuff, by the way. So, we can get in the weeds, and I'll stay there all day.
I'm a tech junkie too, so.
Okay.
I guess just related to that, so my question would be, if the data encrypted in transit is now sitting on a laptop, that laptop, if it's connected to a network, right, so the only way to access it is physical, it couldn't be accessed if someone got into our system?
Yes, that very much. So if I break into this laptop and it's running, absolutely right. The data is unencrypted for this laptop. So then, yes, I could absolutely get to that data because this machine's running. If this machine were to be lost and it's shut off, and someone takes the hard drive out because they can't get through the authentication, they can't log into the laptop, they're going to find that our hard drives are encrypted. We've been encrypting hard drives for several years now. If they physically got access to this laptop, they wouldn't be able to get to it. But breaking into the laptop while it's running, yes.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions in the community? Comments? Thank you, George, for your time this morning.
So this can
Thank you.
go to first read then, with the little additions and giving it an actual number, which will probably be next in line.
Okay.
And then we'll bring a regulation back next month.
Just make sure George didn't have any other items on the agenda. You don't this morning, correct? You didn't have anything else on the agenda this morning? No.
No, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, we have policy and AR 136, home education, beginning on page 25 of your packet. There were some updates that we've forecasted for you based on changes in the law, and I'd like, because I don't know that there's redlining in your packet, if Ken, you're able to point out some of the changes that were proposed. Again, I know these were based on changes in the law.
Yeah, the changes were correct. The changes were at 55, I believe.
Yes.
And it has to do with the extent to which the district is required by law to allow participation in extracurricular activities for students who are homeschooled. I'm just,
Ken, I'm not sure that this has been
policy or is
updated.
in the regular?
Is this?
So it's really the changes just to the regulation, then I believe. The major change is on page 32, which is where we basically say that providing, I don't know if anybody remembers this conversation from a couple of months ago. There was a state law passed that said we had to allow a student to participate in the educational program of the school for at least up to a certain amount. And at least up to is mutually exclusive. The law is worded to the point where it doesn't make sense. And we were trying to get clarity on what they were actually talking about before we passed it. But what we think it meant was the district is not obligated to provide educational programming for home education student unless, for more than, I think it's a third of the day.
It's 25%.
25, yeah. So that's what we ended up, that's basically what we ended up proposing. It could be, we're still waiting for more clarification from the legislature on this.
So for the purposes of this conversation today and timelines, there's nothing that we need to move forward today so that if this is just a proposed revision, our timeline is that it has to be implemented by next school year. So just keeping in mind if there are conversations and revisions, we have time to do that. It doesn't need to move forward today. And if there's, specific language, if we're missing a revision that we didn't have, we can certainly make sure that next time we're ready to.
Yeah, and I'm just
have a
double
full
checking my
update.
notes to make sure there weren't any other major changes. But you're correct. This doesn't go into effect till September. And it doesn't affect that many kids.
Can I ask some questions then? So on the policy, does it make sense to also here have a purpose, right? Like, we're doing this because, I think adding in, or that we support, families that choose home. And I wonder also if it makes sense to add in, it took me a second to think, oh, this is what I think of as homeschooling as opposed to home education. I don't know if that's vernacular or it's just semantics, and it might be just help clarify.
It's called home education in the law, and our BEC says home education, and I'm assuming that's why our policy probably says home education as well, although we call it homeschooling, right? I mean,
yeah.
But if you go to PDE and you look at the law, it's at home education, and I think that's probably why the policy is titled that.
Got it, okay. And this is separate from, what is the program where if a student is sick for? Homebound. Thank you, okay.
Which we have that in another policy. I do, just on your point about structure, because this is an existing policy, I think, as we're thinking about our process, when we do some revisions, the intent here was just to go in with the update, but I do like the framing that we've been doing of making sure there's some kind of purpose statement, and as just, I echo what the feedback you've been giving in that as we're pulling up policies for review, making it clear, maybe just including a purpose statement, even if it's just a sentence or two, is helpful. So I'm just taking note of that. Good suggestion.
So would you like we can add one. It's, and I think you want it to be more than just, I mean, I want to make sure I'm accurately stating your belief. I mean, I don't know that home education is necessarily something that the district wants to give a full-throated endorsement to or not.
I think it's why do we have a policy, though? Like, for those that have,
Yeah, but
that
is
choose.
to comply with the law, or is it
Correct.
simply for those who, homeschooling is a right under Pennsylvania law, for those residents of Lower Merion School District who choose to exercise that right, here's the rules.
Yeah, that's it,
Does that
yeah.
sound good?
Yeah,
Right,
kind of like
because even
instructions.
if you just look at 825, the law enforcement, one of the purposes, the board recognizes the need to do this. And I think that, something similar to that, tied in with what you just said, is all that we need.
Okay, all right, we can do that. And we can bring this one back if you like, because there's no timeline on it. I didn't do a very good job, I don't think, of stating what the purpose of the law was in terms of making you allow to have students attend school. This has to do with co-curricular education. The difference between extracurricular is when you have like an activity that has nothing to do with the educational program necessarily. A co-curricular activity is something that if a student were attending school, they have to take a class as well in order to be in the program. I believe the examples of this, not necessarily here, but other places, are like, if you're on the school newspaper, you might need to take a journalism class. If you're in the band, you might need to take an instrument class. If you're in the chorus, you might need to take a class. And what they're saying is, school districts across the state have been saying to kids, well, you can't be in band because if you're being homeschooled, because you're being homeschooled, you can't take our class, and because you can't take our class, you can't take band class, and because you can't take band class, you can't be in the band at all. And this says, no, that's not going to be the rule. You have to allow the student to take the co-curricular class, but you can't, but as a homeschooled student, you're still a limit. There's a cap on how much school you can take. The other thing is to affirm that even if you're entitled to take that class, we're not transporting you. You have to get here to and from school on your own. That's really what these changes are, and I sort of said it that way the first time.
That's very helpful. I have a question that's not related to what you just said, but on page 28, on number 5, is that in, oh, no, not number 5, the one underneath, the paragraph underneath that. Is that saying that a student can only be homeschooled if no one in their household has a criminal record? Am I? Right, so like are you forced to go to school if you're, I'm sure that that's part of the law, but it just really struck me. Maybe I'm misreading that.
Well,
The affidavit thing. All adults in the home and persons have legal custody of a child.
And that's, I want to check that. Yeah, that's not new language, I don't think. Let me check that.
It was just really,
Yeah,
it popped out at me, like, really?
I don't know if that disqualifies you from homeschooling your child. I need to check, double check. We'll double check that.
And then on page 29, where it says at the secondary level in the second paragraph, I'm surprised that it doesn't have government.
It's civics. I don't know, is civics and government the same thing?
Okay. Well, one could argue, I mean, I'm just thinking about, there was that new-ish, it's been several years now, the civics education thing that was passed, and you have to have civics, which is separate from you have to be in a, like you were supposed to pass the civics test, even though you didn't actually have to pass it, you just had to take the civics test.
Yes.
But that's separate from having to take the government class.
There is no mandate that you have to take a government class. Civics, this in here we have government and our students take it as part of what we do, but you have to pass the assessment. It's more about the assessment than the class, right? So, which is why everybody's offering a civics government class, because you teach it and then everybody has to take an assessment in the public school setting. Homeschool has different laws, though, than public school setting, right? And so we don't actually govern what's required. The state governs what's required. They don't have to take the assessment either. So there's no mandate that a homeschool student has to take that assessment either.
Okay, so, and maybe this is a conversation to have at a separate time. It is often difficult for students that do the IB program that don't think about that in 9th grade, to, you know, decide at the end of 10th grade to then fit in government. And I was under the impression that that government class was a state requirement. Is that incorrect?
The assessment's a state requirement. I don't believe the classes, I've never, like, unless I'm like, it's not the class, it's the assessment. So we teach the class and then the assessment along with it. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, but we require our kids. Like, is that then an LMSD requirement that our kids have to take government?
It's part of our sequence, right? So like, you know how you, yes, everybody has
But our
their own
sequence is-
sequencing and what's required and what's not in their sequencing.
Because that's, just because it's really hard sometimes for those kids that don't know in advance that they're going to do IB and they decide in 11th, end of 10th grade, they've not had government, and then it's really hard to get government into your schedule. Like, it's a difficult scheduling thing, and I know parents have tried to do, you know, online courses, and that hasn't been allowed. So that's why that's why it struck me, and I'm trying to figure out, is there any flexibility there then?
So not from our requirements, right? So
Okay.
we make a decision as a district on what we require, like, just like you would say Algebra 1, Algebra 2, right? We do like a world history, some people do it differently, you know, US history or US government, and different districts attack it differently. So they may do it thematically versus saying you're gonna go sequentially, and then the districts decide what the requirements are. So even with like an English class, we would say English 1, but our content is what we deem it to be. English 2, our content is what we deem it to be. And so that's how it works, more than you have to take all of these classes. Like, there's no mandate that you take. There's a mandate, I guess, that you take Algebra 1, but our Algebra 1 really is part of integrated math, right? So if you think of that, that's exactly a good example of how I think I'm trying to explain this, right? So for us, integrated 2 is where our students take a Keystone Algebra exam. The kids have to take a Keystone Algebra exam, but the state doesn't say you have to have Algebra 1. They say you have to have your students take a Keystone Algebra exam. So some districts offer it right after their Algebra 1, right? That's the trigger course, they call it, right? That's what it is. For us, when we switch to the integrated approach for mathematics, our trigger course for Algebra Keystone is actually integrated 2, right? Just because of the way that we teach it. So even though the test is mandated, the state doesn't say you have to have Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Algebra 3. Does that make sense now if I'm kind of explaining it correctly?
That makes sense. I'm just, and don't get me wrong, I think that everyone should. Oh, go ahead.
I think that IB requires government too.
But they don't offer
I mean,
government.
also.
The IB program doesn't offer an IB government class.
I don't
But
remember what all
they, you're right, but they require like government to be in the IB program.
I can get more information on that. I don't, off the top of my head, I can't speak to that. I've looked at the IB courses, but I really don't have them memorized. So let me get more information and come back on that.
And again, I'm not suggesting that kids shouldn't be taking government class, because I think that they should. It's just recognizing that it becomes quite tricky if you haven't done it before you start the IB program. So, and that's tangential to this, so I apologize for that, but it jumped out at me.
Any other questions from the board?
I'm on page 25. I was reading like the library when staffed, and I was reading above where things apply to in the student's attendance zone, and I wondered if, is that any library, or should it be in the student's attendance zone and corresponding grade level? Oh, that's on page 25, section 4, under delegation of responsibility. There's 3 bullets.
Yes, home educated student eligible, I'm sorry, that's the one, the supplementary curriculum services?
Yes, and what is it, any library they can attend, or is it in their corresponding to their grade level and attendance zone?
Yeah, it would be grade level and attendance zone.
Yeah. So if you just use an example, like a second grader accessing their library at Kenwood, because that's where they live, as opposed to being able to walk into Lower Merion High School and access that library.
Yeah, because I'm thinking we should clarify that. And then the other.
Just to be clear then, so you wanted to say eligible for supplementary grade appropriate curriculum services?
Yeah.
Within their attendance zone.
And attendance zone.
Oh, curriculum services in their attendance zone.
Yeah, and corresponding grade level or some kind of grade, something.
I wonder if it's less clunky if it goes under the first bullet, the library, because that's specifically, like those other ones are specific to a physical location.
Yeah.
So you wanted to go up in the intro, the paragraph before any of the numbered paragraphs?
No.
I think it's clarified in the upper paragraphs, I believe.
Oh, I see, it's clarified in 3.
Yeah, but not in 4.
Would that make sense, though, for to be applicable to, to say it up front at the top and then say where applicable? And that way you catch all of them?
Yeah, I guess in the future, if something else is added on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then in that section 4 too, the superintendent may make exceptions at her discretion. We should add there. And the last one I have is on page 32. Right of hearing. Oh, actually, I got a quick one is the next one below. It needs a paragraph return under participation co-curricular. The students just kind of runs into it. It should be a return.
Oh, yeah, I saw the space.
Yeah. I'm just like right of hearing. It just kind of comes at you without any saying like, what is the hearing about? I'm assuming it from reading it, it's IEP 504, if I'm correct me. And I'm just wondering about remedial education plan. Seems outdated language, and I don't know if that's language we have to use because of the laws, but.
I'm sorry, the right of hearing?
Right of hearing, yeah, on page 32.
Yeah, that's got nothing to do with special education.
Oh, it's nothing, okay.
That has to do with if the district challenges, it's the prior section, it's evaluation requirements, and the district challenges the program or saying the program isn't going on as it's supposed to be, there's notification procedures, and so this allows the district to, basically, if the district terminates the program, it gives somebody the right to challenge it.
Okay, because the thing before it is textbooks and curriculum materials.
I think I agree with Melanie. The thing about opening up policy, even if you're just trying to do a little amendment, is that you kind of see it with fresh eyes, and there's an opportunity, given that we are going to bring it back, to do a little reorganization and clarify. I agree with you. It kind of like
it comes out of nowhere.
Flow from that, and even if it was a cross-reference somewhere else, we
just need to move that textbook and curriculum materials section, because if you look at the last sentence of the evaluation requirements, right before textbook and curriculum, it says the board of directors shall provide for a proper hearing as detailed below.
Oh, that would make more sense than if that ran right into it.
So if we put that hearing right after that, then it's.
See, I have short-term memory. As soon as I read the next paragraph, I've forgotten about that.
But a lot of people don't read right through, and they like to read headings, so that, I think there's some adjustment we can make.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
Well, I also don't know, maybe the board of the hearing should provide for a proper hearing as follows. And then just make it all one, make it part of that section, since
Yeah,
I think it's
that would make more sense, yeah.
probably,
No, and then the other was just remedial education plan. Is that a term we have to use because of governing law, or is that something we need to update?
where's that?
That's in the right of hearing, first paragraph, third line down, right on the right-hand side.
Oh, we could probably come up with a better word than that.
Yeah.
A more current word.
Yeah.
It's probably out of this, I mean, the home education, homeschooling statute is from 1949, I think.
Yeah,
Well, maybe not quite that bad, but it's pretty old.
okay. Okay, that's it for me.
I'm just curious, do we know offhand how many families participate or choose this?
It's so funny you asked that. I've been emailing. Before I saw the policy, I don't have a number. That was what I asked. So I will hopefully be able to tell you by the end of the meeting. I've been checking. It isn't a huge number of students. And honestly, the law has changed so significantly that we really don't go to hearings anymore, because the affidavit, when it's signed off by the examiner, that means that it passes muster. In the past, we used to have to review every single one of the portfolios and look at them, and often you may question what comes in from the standpoint of quality and depth. But right now, the way that the law is written, it's such that once their examiner signs the document, that's it, it's over. And so we really don't have any rights to do the evaluations as we used to, which is when you would have had a hearing. And I've had that in the past, but the law is so dramatically different than it used to be on homeschooling. So even though it has to be here, it's not something that typically occurs. But I'll find out hopefully by the end of the meeting, I'll have a number for you. And
the other thing is, with the advent of cyber schools, it's kind of made homeschooling a little almost not moot, but somewhat obsolete. Why would you go through the trouble of designing your own education program when, if your goal is to have your child educated at home, you just go to a cyber school, it's free, and you already, and you get a free laptop.
And we see people pick and choose. So they'll do homeschool, but they'll have students in a cyber program as part of their homeschool plan. Not maybe every single thing that they're teaching the children, but, we'll see them be a participant in some kind of cyber program as well. Yeah.
And I also just wanted to note, I know at Penn Valley and at Harriton that there are at least one family that their kids do participate in our extracurricular program, whether it's theater or it used to be chess club. So I like that. Clearly people are taking advantage of that, which is great.
And for individuals that I put on the spot today, I apologize, Dr. McGloin, because we did we talked about fast tracking this a little bit, because it does go to these ongoing conversations about if there's a transportation impact here, to factor into the work that we're doing around the logistics of changing start time. Like every route matters. So that's one of our thought of getting it kind of moving was, even though we know that the language hasn't been fully settled from a policy standpoint, that piece was important to us to factor into those, for our transportation analysis, so.
It could also have an impact on our schedule, yes. Right? Because when we're thinking about co-curricular classes, our students can now take classes, and so that'll have to be a factor in the scheduling that we do going into next school year.
So you want to bring this back with a purpose section, some editorial changes, putting up that, and rearranging a little bit.
I think we need to bring it back as a first read with those revisions.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm sorry, that was just a tangential comment that the way we cascade or waterfall our classes, if you were going to do a co-curricular like band class, that would be, every day you'd be going to school at a different time, right? Like if you're,
yeah. Which is another reason transportation really isn't an option for us. Right, because how would you transport a child when, you're right, our classes rotate, especially at the high school. right? Yeah.
Any other questions from the board on this? You'll get to see it again as a first read, so.
Next month.
Yes.
We're bringing this one back.
Correct, I apologize, yeah. We'll be looking at it again next month at the policy committee as a first read. Just, Suba, did you have anything, or I'm going to ask if there are any community comments?
Yeah, are there any community comments?
Yes, there is.
Jill Altschuler, Marion Station. I just wonder, I know this is a different policy, but I was wondering if I could ask a question about the civics aspect of it. And if not, that's fine. If you could just tell me when that might be. Just about the PDE support for Act 35 assessment of civics knowledge, and not Parents Defending Education, the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And I can ask that, so if you could tell me, it doesn't have to do with the homeschooling, it's just about the civics component of it.
Can we take that offline or do it separately?
Yeah. I just didn't, if you could tell me where to direct that, that would be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other community questions? All right. Seeing none. Going to, moving down our agenda, just briefly, and I'll ask Ken to weigh in on this. 114-2 needs some minor revisions as reflected in your packet. I believe, though, we're still working through some of that, and we'll be bringing that back as well next month.
Yeah, next month, or maybe not even that soon. These are being revised in response to some guidance from OCR, and we just want to make sure that it's not just 114-2, it's also 124, I believe, and some other ones as well. So we're making sure that OCR, concurs that we're correctly interpreting their guidance. So you'll see these eventually, but this is just a preview. They may be in a slightly or different form than when you ultimately see them. But there's nothing to be done right now.
Okay.
So I know that the term handicap is embedded in the law, but I also know that that's not preferred usage now. Is there any way to kind of acknowledge that? I mean, it hits me every time. And I think, and then I'm like, okay, well, because, as defined in federal law, like it says that right in the definition, but it just bothers me.
I wonder.
Agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. I wonder if we can just use the term we want to use, and again, like footnote, like this is intended to represent this same term that's used in law. So we can just say it like as a footnote, but throughout we're using language that is more appropriate. I would agree with you. So instead of trying to just insert our language, make reference that this is intended to be the same, defined term as reflected in federal and state law. Does that work? That's something we can do.
Sure, if it's okay with OCR. Well, that's what we'll find out.
Yeah. I think it's a good request. I mean, a good thing to clarify with them.
Right, but
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want OCR to ding us because we didn't use their words. So
Right.
we'll clear it with OCR.
And if they don't agree with that, could we put something in our introduction that says, we're using this term because it's federally regulated, even though we would use something else, right? I don't know if there's a better way to say that, but.
No, I
right?
think we'll say it.
Just to be upfront and acknowledge, like, this isn't where we are right now.
Yeah, I don't think OCR is going to have a problem with it, but we're dealing with, to some extent, with bureaucrats. I'm sorry. Just got to, I guess a former OCR employee didn't like that comment.
Okay, so those two are coming back next month or in the future when OCR gives their opinion. Do we have anything else, Megan?
No, because we jumped around on the agenda. We are, I believe, according to my count, at the end, we have some items for future discussion that we will, that progress is being made on these items in terms of reporting of student progress, grading of student progress, whether we have like a finalized policy or update by the end of the year. I think we're working towards that end, and it's one of those conversations that just can get so deep that I think, you know, that's the important work, and we're working to update those policies as well. And, you know, again, thinking whether it will be by the end of this year or not, we'll have an update next month about the progress or our timeline for that. The discriminatory harassment, bullying, and hazing is up for a review because we have to review it every so often from a reporting standpoint, but we did do updates on that recently. A conversation that we've been having, though, and sort of had connected to 235 was whether to completely embed those policies within 235 so it's not a standalone item when you're thinking about, you know, rules and regulations. It's all in one place for, again, the end user ease of use. So those are, you know, the conversations we're having and what, you know, will continue to move forward on the agenda. Other than
okay. So thank you so much, everyone.
We have, I'm sorry.
Ken, do you want to go through the summary?
We also have community members. I didn't know if you wanted to open the floor for any additional comments.
Sure.
So, yeah. Yes, we have.
Okay, Lisa Prosnitz, Penn Valley. Just a few quick questions. One is regarding school start times. I'm hearing reports, and this is anecdotal, so I'm just wondering what the policy is around teachers who may have concerns about some of the proposed times, speaking directly with students and families versus addressing it through the board. Like, is there a policy around that? What was my other question? Here we are. Wellness committee was my other. I saw that it was like on the, for discussion at some point. Yeah, for discussion, student wellness. Just wondering what the timeline is. I know our wellness policy is outdated. We have a policy, we have a wellness committee that's been meeting intermittently. But just was curious about that too.
We did talk about it in the beginning.
Oh, you did? I missed it.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. But if you did not, Denise is getting it. There's a one-page thing. Do you want to just do a quick recap?
Sure. I'd be happy to. So I moved that to the front just because of other people's schedules. So we moved it up as an update item. So shared that we are working through the process of the student wellness policy development, even though we have an existing policy, as we've, I think, acknowledged a number of times, it's fairly limited. It's a compliance-based policy. So one of the ways that just in my work in policy, I've found to be an effective way to build consensus around, you know, where we're going with the policy is to start with a draft purpose statement. And this, what you have in front of you is a draft statement that we have been getting input from other groups and students and staff and families and whoever wants to weigh in on this is welcome to, because I think once you start with the purpose and have clarity there, it's easier to build the defined terms, easier to build the guidance moving forward. And I think we've had some really healthy dialogue. This is maybe the third version of this based on what I call the shopping around that we've done of this. So I welcome anyone that's here, anyone that's listening at home, to give some input in the way I think is an easy way to do it is for people to highlight or circle things that resonate, that are really important, that really hone in on those values we want to capture. And then where there are questions or things that are just absolutely don't belong here, to make note of that as well and share that back to us. So that's really the process we've been following, and we'll try to make it more available to others as well. But we do have a timeline of existing meetings and outreach that we're doing that we talked about bringing back next time so that we can share that out as well. So,
With the goal of by the last policy meeting, having the policy done.
correct,
Here.
correct.
And that last policy meeting is June, May?
Well, the last scheduled one is May, and that's what we're aiming for. June is an optional if we need it, so. Or if just people like policy.
The question was, is there a policy on teachers communicating with students and parents regarding their positions on healthy start times? Well, there is. Yeah, there is actually, and it's not black and white. It's the sense that there's some gray. Their employees have a certain amount of freedom of expression, but they're not supposed to use their status as a teacher to, put personal pressure on students and parents for personal reasons. So if somebody objects to the healthy start times because they believe that it's not a valid theory of education, that's one thing. But if they're if they're lobbying not to have them put in or have them put in because it works out better for their personal schedule, that's not appropriate and should be communicated to the building principal. Right?
Can I just, the handout that we have here is not on board docs right now, so as soon as this meeting's over, it will be added for anyone that's watching from home.
Absolutely. I just want to label it, make sure people know it's a draft and the process. Yeah.
Okay. Ken, do you want to summarize the meeting?
Happy to. So, policy 825 will be up for adoption at the next regular board meeting. Policy 8, number to be determined, 800 series on data breach prevention will be up for first read. Policy 604 will be up for first read. Policy 136 is coming back to committee with some revisions. AR 114-2, AR 124 will resurface before this committee at some point once OCR has weighed in on them. AR 610 will be updated and posted, and student wellness is work in progress, as you heard. Miss anything?
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. The next meeting of the policy committee is March 3rd at 8:30 a.m. in the district administration building. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thanks, Suba.